Sit here by my side, wise and God-fearing man. Imagine placing your feet in the water with me. You are safe here with me. Today I want to share with you in detail a wisdom about generosity in the light of the Word of God, as perhaps you have never heard before. There is an eternal principle that echoes since the days I wrote the book of Proverbs. He who shuts his ear to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be heard. But for you to understand the power and the full meaning of this word, which may seem simple and even obvious to some, I want you to stay with me a little longer. I am sure this moment of rest will greatly build up your life. Let us open again the pages of Proverbs, now in chapter 21, from verse 10 to verse 15. There I declared that the wicked desire the harm of their neighbor, that the mocker brings with him wrath, that the righteous are guided by their own integrity, and that when justice is established, there is joy for the upright and terror for those who practice evil. I wanted to show that life moves under a law of reciprocity. The ear that shuts itself to the cry will one day find itself shut in its own cry. And he who makes room for justice also finds favor when he needs it most. Now, I want you to take a deep breath and allow the truths that will be revealed to find dwelling in your heart. You are not before an ordinary video that came to you by chance, but before an experience in which every word is born from the wisdom that God granted me. Today, we will walk together through readings of the Word interwoven with practical reflections, with prayers that align the heart with heaven, and with directions that touch daily life. You may have already noticed, but do not be surprised, for I will speak to you as if I were King Solomon himself. This is only to lead you to immerse yourself in the experience of wisdom recorded in a different way, as if we were side by side in communion before the Lord. Therefore, I want to lift up now a prayer for you. Lord God of all wisdom, I ask you to open the ears of this man who fears you and listens to me now. Give him a sensitive heart and hands ready to act, that he may not harden his soul before the cry of the needy, but that he may find joy in being a channel of your generosity. Establish his steps so that he may live as a wise man, planting seeds of compassion that bear fruit in righteousness and abundance. Amen. If this journey has already begun to speak to your heart, make this moment a sign before God. Like this video and subscribe to this channel. Not as someone who merely consumes another piece of content, but as someone who decides to continue receiving counsel that shapes wise and God-fearing men. Here, what I offer you is simple but profound. Enter, enjoy my space and peace, rest, and learn with me my eternal wisdoms. This is the path we will walk together from now on. Ears that open, heaven that responds. Let us now open the Word in Proverbs chapter 11, starting at verse 24 and continuing to verse 31. I wrote, "There are those who give generously and see their wealth grow even more, and there are those who withhold more than is right and fall into poverty. The generous will prosper, and he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. The people curse him who hoards grain, but blessing rests on the head of him who sells it with justice. He who seeks good finds favor, but he who seeks evil, evil will come to him. Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like the green leaf. He who troubles his own house will inherit the wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise of heart. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who wins souls is wise. If the righteous are rewarded on earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner?" What I wanted to show with these words is that the hand that opens finds solid channels of provision, while the closed hand digs its own scarcity. When you, wise man, decide to help those in need, you not only share what you have, but create a flow that returns at the right time. Generosity does not impoverish. On the contrary, it strengthens, because it builds trust among men and opens doors before God, while the heart that withholds what should be shared finds itself alone when most in need. This is the law that governs heaven and earth. He who scatters will see flourishing. He who shuts his ears will reap silence. Very well, I will move forward with you now to Ecclesiastes, chapter 11, from verse 1 to verse 6. There I wrote, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Give a portion to 7 and even to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. If the clouds are full, they pour rain upon the earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. Whoever watches the wind will not sow, and whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the path of the wind, nor how bones are formed in the womb of a pregnant woman, so you do not know the works of God who makes all things. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let not your hand be idle. For you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both will be equally good. What I meant to teach here is that life requires confident and constant sowing. The God-fearing man learns to cast his seed even without knowing when the harvest will come. He does not remain paralyzed waiting for the wind to stop. He sows because he trusts in the timing of the Almighty. Notice that I did not say to cast only one part, but to share with 7 and even with 8. This is diversification. This is prudence. It is preparing for the future without depending on a single source. He who lives with arms crossed waiting for guarantees never reaps anything. But he who casts his bread upon the waters discovers that provision returns multiplied. Well then, I now want to read to you the Song of Songs, chapter 2, from verses 10 to 15. There I wrote, "My beloved spoke and said to me, 'Rise up, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me.' See, the winter has passed, the rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth, the season of singing has come. The voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree forms its early fruit, and the blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Rise up, come, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. Catch for us the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, our vineyards that are in bloom." Here, what I wanted to show is that the most beautiful bonds can be ruined not by great tragedies, but by small indifferences, the little foxes that destroy the vineyard. The wise man does not ignore the small cries, does not despise the discreet signs of fatigue, loneliness, or pain, because it is in the neglected detail that an entire vineyard can wither. Generosity is not only about great acts of giving, it is also about small gestures that keep alive the vineyard of love, the vineyard of friendship, the vineyard of trust. When you hear the small cry, you preserve the great fruit. That is how life flourishes. The invisible mistake that prevents many from living in the fullness of blessing is imagining that shutting the ear means only not having money to give. But I tell you, it goes much further. Shutting the ear is the choice to anesthetize the conscience before a legitimate need. It is pretending not to see. It is justifying indifference with words that seem prudent, but that in the end conceal hardness of heart. The God-fearing man cannot confuse discernment with coldness. There is indeed a difference between a real cry and abuse. But when we use that difference only as an excuse not to help, we are committing the same error as those who harden their hearts. What I wanted to teach in my Proverbs is that generosity is not occasional alms, but a permanent posture of attention and readiness. To shut the ears, even when one could act, is to dismantle the bridge that one day will be needed to cross. And because I know the human heart needs clarity, I want to show you how generosity expresses itself in 5 very concrete channels. First, the ear. It is the willingness to listen with real attention, without haste and without disdain. Second, the mouth. It is to intercede, to recommend, to give voice to those who have no voice. Third, the hand. It is the practical gesture, the action that relieves the burden of another. Fourth, the schedule. Because time is also a resource, and the wise man understands that dedicating minutes to those in need is as valuable as offering coins. And finally, the doors. Because opening opportunities is a form of generosity that transforms generations. These 5 channels must be cultivated with wisdom. Set limits, yes, so as not to feed abuses, but never turn the limit into an excuse to deny compassion. When these 5 channels are active, the life of the God-fearing man becomes a river that flows constantly, watering the land around him and bringing life wherever he goes. There are very clear signs that a heart is becoming deaf within, and I want you to reflect with me on them. When you begin to grow apathetic before small requests, as if they were too insignificant for your attention, you are already letting the little foxes corrode the vineyard of generosity. When you promise to help but do not fulfill, you sow distrust and make your word lose value. And when the fear of being used becomes greater than the willingness to serve, you begin to wear the mask of prudence that in fact hides self-protection. I wrote that he who shuts his ear to the cry of the poor will also cry and not be heard. And what this means is that each small act of hardness builds an invisible wall that one day will turn against you. The wise man does not fear to take steps of compassion because he knows that God watches over him, while the man who hardens, even if he justifies himself with fine words, discovers later that he was left alone in his own hour of crying. That is why I want to propose to you a practical path. During the next 7 days, establish a commitment to intentional generosity. Set aside a fixed amount, however small, to help someone each week. Set aside a specific time to listen attentively to those who need to unburden. Make it a discipline as important as your work or your meals. And go further. Practice one concrete act per day, whether visiting someone forgotten, interceding in prayer for those who suffer, opening an opportunity, or dedicating real time to those who cry in silence. This practice is not just charity, it is spiritual training. It is you saying to heaven, Lord, I am available to be a channel of care. And the result is that divine favor moves toward the one who keeps ears and hands open. The God-fearing man does not need greatness to live this truth, but constancy. Because abundance does not come from isolated gestures, but from the discipline of listening and acting every day. I will now open with you the book of Psalms, chapter 37, from verse 21 to verse 29. These were words written by my father David, who said this: "The wicked borrow and do not pay back, but the righteous are generous and keep on giving. Those the Lord blesses will inherit the land, but those he curses will be cut off. The Lord makes firm the steps of the man who delights in him. Though he fall, he will not be cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. I was young, and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his children begging bread. He is always merciful and lends, and his children will be blessed. Turn away from evil and do good, and you will dwell in the land forever. For the Lord loves justice and does not forsake his saints. They will be preserved forever. But the offspring of the wicked will be cut off. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever." What my father wanted to show here is that generosity is not loss, it is inheritance. The man who opens his hand and his heart not only sustains the needy of today, but plants a harvest that reaches his children and grandchildren. See how the law is clear. The wicked withhold and end up forsaken. The righteous share and their descendants are sustained. There is a promise of longevity for those who make generosity a lifestyle. Not only in their bank account, but in the peace of their home, in the honor of their family, in the memory they leave among men. Generosity is a road that does not end in the immediate gesture. It opens paths that cross generations. Now I will go back a few pages to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 15, from verses 7 to 11. There Moses wrote, "If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of the towns of your land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother. Instead, you shall open your hand wide to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart and you say, 'The 7th year, the year of release, is near,' and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. You shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him, because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all that you undertake. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy and to the poor in your land." What Moses taught here is in perfect harmony with what I wrote. It is not about impulsive alms, but about a constant, proportional and conscious posture. Generosity that does not tire, that does not calculate excuses to escape, that does not hide behind pretexts. The God-fearing man understands that the poor will always exist, but precisely for this reason, his life must be a constant channel of care. And when he does this, the blessing of God rests on his work and on his home. It is not a burden, it is a privilege. It is not a weight, it is a covenant of trust. The open ear and the outstretched hand are the signs that you walk in alliance with the Creator himself. There is an image I like to use so that the heart understands the weight of this principle. Imagine a bridge. Every time you open your ear to someone in need, you place another firm stone on that bridge. And every time you choose to ignore, you remove an essential stone. Until one day, when it is your turn to cross, you discover that the bridge no longer exists. What I meant to teach with Proverbs 21:13 is exactly this. Indifference dismantles the paths by which you yourself will need to pass. The wise man understands that reputation is a kind of capital. When he is generous, he accumulates trust. When he is harsh, he accumulates silence. And in the hour of his need, it is the bridges of trust that determine whether someone will run to him or whether all will turn away. But I also want to tell you that it is not too late to rebuild a broken bridge. When you realize that you shut your ears in the past, there is a way back. It begins with humility to ask forgiveness, acknowledging that you ignored cries you could have answered. It continues with reparative acts, not empty words. And it is sustained by constancy, because a single action does not erase years of neglect. It is in the daily sequence of small gestures that trust is rebuilt. The God-fearing man is not ashamed to admit failures, because he knows that the mercy of the Lord accompanies him. But he also is not deceived. No bridge is rebuilt in a day. It requires brick upon brick, day after day, until it can again bear the weight of crossing. There is a silent secret that governs the trust of men and the favor of God. This secret is not in the performative arms made to be seen, but in consistency. He who appears once to give and disappears the next day inspires trust neither before heaven nor before earth. But he who keeps a track of objective compassion, who makes generosity a structured and predictable habit, conquers something that no money can buy: trust. The wise man measures his life not by how much he displayed, but by how much he sustained in secret, because it is consistency that generates deep roots. And I want to leave a very simple criterion for you to evaluate yourself. Ask, do the people who walk with me feel confident in seeking me when they need? Has the number of those who knock on your door, ask for your ear, seek your counsel increased? If so, it is because your life has become a visible channel of care. But if you realize that all remains silent before you, perhaps it is a sign that your ear has shut. The God-fearing man transforms his house, his company, his very life into a possible refuge for the needy. And this does not arise from isolated gestures, but from a humble constancy that, day after day, keeps the 5 channels of generosity open. I am not saying your life must be entirely dedicated to helping others, but God knows all things, and He will bring to you only what you are able to bear. This is the forgotten secret that sustains divine and human trust. When there is consistency, heaven opens, and so do men. Before we move on to the next part, I want us to take a quick pause, a pause of communion that is not a waste of time, but the cultivation of what remains. If you can, now close your eyes for a moment. Breathe deeply and let the silence within you make room for the voice of God. Let the words I have spoken so far settle in you. Ask your heart, whom do I need to listen to this week? What cry have I been ignoring, perhaps because it seemed small, but that asks for an answer? This is the moment to bring that before the Lord in prayer. If you prefer, pause this video for a moment. If you wish, write in the comments a prayer request, say your name, some reference of where you are, and leave it here, in this space. We are a brotherhood of God-fearing men. When you share, you not only speak, but open the opportunity for another to intercede for you. And where 2 or more gather in prayer, the presence of the Lord is manifested. Pray also for whoever comments before or after you. Turn this space into a bridge of care and intercession. Remain in silence for a few seconds, or lift your voice if you wish. But do not leave this moment without deciding to open your ears. Because heaven responds when we also respond to the cry of the earth. Generosity as governance, brands that listen, heaven that sustains. Let us now open in Proverbs chapter 29, starting at verse 4 and continuing to verse 14. I wrote, "By justice a king gives a country stability, but one who is greedy for bribes tears it down. Those who flatter their neighbors are spreading nets for their feet. Evildoers are snared by their own sin, but the righteous shout for joy and are glad." The righteous care about justice for the poor, but the wicked have no such concern. Mockers stir up a city, but the wise turn away anger. If a wise man goes to court with a fool, the fool rages and scoffs, and there is no peace. The bloodthirsty hate a person of integrity and seek to kill the upright. Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. If a ruler listens to lies, all his officials become wicked. The poor and the oppressor have this in common. The Lord gives sight to the eyes of both. If a king judges the poor with fairness, his throne will be established forever. What I wanted to teach with these words is that the prosperity of a city, a company, a household, is not sustained on exploitation but on equity. The leader who listens to the cry of the poor establishes his throne, but the one who shuts his ears undermines his own authority. The wise man understands that the strength of his leadership does not lie in the fear he imposes, but in the trust he inspires. And when the ruler or the manager closes his ear, he destroys the bridge of cooperation. But when he opens space for the cause of the needy, he establishes roots that keep the foundation of his work firm. Very well, I will continue with you now to Ecclesiastes chapter 5, from verse 8 to verse 12. There I wrote, "If you see the poor oppressed in a district and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things, for one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much, but the abundance of the rich permits them no sleep." What I wanted to show here is that systems of oppression will always exist when ears are closed, and that accumulation without ethics is vanity that does not satisfy. The God-fearing man understands that it is useless to gather wealth at the cost of injustice, because that wealth becomes a burden and not rest. Better is the sleep of the honest worker than the sleepless nights of the one who accumulates without limit. This word also speaks of leadership. When the manager oppresses, he digs isolation. When he cares, he establishes trust. And the result is that even in the most unstable market, the hand of the Lord sustains the man who acts with justice and generosity. I will now move forward to Song of Songs, chapter 1, verses 5 to 8. There I wrote, "Dark am I, yet lovely, daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, because the sun has darkened me. My mother's sons were angry with me and made me take care of the vineyards. My own vineyard I had to neglect. Tell me, you whom I love, where you graze your flock and where you rest your sheep at midday. Why should I be like a veiled woman beside the flocks of your friends? If you do not know, most beautiful of women, follow the tracks of the sheep and graze your young goats by the tents of the shepherds." Here I wanted to honor the dignity of those who work under the sun, carrying invisible weight. The woman who speaks in this song feels forgotten, marked by hard work and invisibility. And what this teaches us, wise man, is that generosity in leadership also means seeing those who are unseen. At work, in the company, in the community, there are many who sustain the foundations but receive no honor. And when the leader decides to listen to that silent cry, he restores dignity, and with that, builds a culture of loyalty that no crisis can destroy. This is the heart of generous governance, not just numbers, but people, not just profits, but justice that sustains. The truth that few want to admit is that prosperity is not sustained only by good numbers, but by brands that practice mercy. When a businessman sets unjust deadlines for his suppliers, when a manager demands crushing goals from his employees, when a leader treats clients as numbers and not as people, he digs his own ruin. The wise man understands that, in a crisis, only those you have helped will run to help you. If you built your story ignoring cries, do not expect anyone to stand up for you when it is your turn to ask for help. But if your life was marked by generosity and justice, the memory of the good you planted will run to sustain you. That is why I say that generosity in business is not romanticism. but intelligent policy. The God-fearing man establishes an emergency fund to help employees in difficult times. He grants ethical deadlines to small suppliers because he knows that his survival depends on theirs. He designs accessible products because he understands that blessing is measured not only by profit, but by impact. And he creates listening channels that respond quickly within 48 hours, because one who listens promptly prevents small problems from becoming crises. In addition, he gives account to the community, showing clear reports of local impact. This is not just a spiritual attitude, it is a competitive advantage, because trust and loyalty cannot be bought, they must be cultivated. And do not think this applies only to companies. In personal leadership, it also applies. What I call shepherd's ears is the ability to put people before numbers. When a leader listens, his team feels safe to speak the truth. Then risks are revealed before they become tragedies. Ideas flourish because there is no fear. And loyalty multiplies because people know they are not just tools for profit, but part of a work family. The wise man leads this way, while the one who shuts his ears creates a culture of silence and self-protection, until one day he cries out for commitment and no one responds. He asks them to wear the jersey, but discovers distant hearts because the harvest of indifference has arrived. The signs of a deaf organization are clear. Problems always arrive too late because no one feels comfortable speaking up. Turnover increases because talents find no space. Suggestions decrease because everyone has learned that it is useless to propose anything. And stress becomes the rule because people work in fear. The God-fearing man must face these signs with courage. A 30, 60, and 90-day plan can transform this reality. First, mapping hidden cries. Then, correcting glaring injustices. And finally, institutionalizing generosity so that it does not depend on the leader's mood, but becomes a stable culture. And to show that this is not only my voice, I want to open now in Deuteronomy chapter 24, from verses 14 to 22. Moses wrote, "Do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether that worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner residing in one of your towns. Pay them their wages each day before sunset, because they are poor and counting on it. Otherwise they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. Do not deprive the foreigner or the fatherless of justice, or take the cloak of the widow as a pledge. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. That is why I command you to do this. When you are harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, do not go back to get it. Leave it for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat the olives from your trees, do not go over the branches a second time. Leave what remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you harvest the grapes in your vineyard, do not go over the vines again. Leave what remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. That is why I command you to do this." What Moses taught here is that generosity must be structured as public policy, not just a sporadic gesture, but a discipline of justice. Paying wages on time, leaving gleanings for the needy, not exploiting the weakness of those already carrying too much weight. This word is so current it could be read in any business board meeting. The wise man understands that his prosperity is sustained by the hand of God, and that this hand moves in favor of those who make room for the orphan, the widow, the foreigner. When a company decides to embrace these principles, it becomes a refuge in times of crisis. And when a family decides to live this way, it becomes shelter in days of storm. This is the ethic that precedes and sustains true prosperity. There is still a verse of my father David that I want to read to you. Let us open Psalm 15 from verse 1 to verse 5. He wrote, "Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? The one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbor and casts no slur on others, who despises a vile person but honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps an oath even when it hurts and does not change their mind, who lends money to the poor without interest, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. See how my father David's voice is in perfect harmony with what I taught. True prosperity cannot be sustained without ethics. It is no use seeking growth if the price is to exploit the innocent, deceive in dealings, or be corrupted by bribes. The wise man understands that to dwell in the presence of God and to remain firm before men requires this foundation of justice and generosity. The one who promises and keeps it even to his own hurt shows character worthy of trust, and it is this character that becomes the foundation of all other blessings. The God-fearing man knows that if his word is worth nothing, his wealth will also be worth nothing. But if his integrity is non-negotiable, even when he loses in the short term, he will gain in the long run. Now, I need to show you why most fail when they try to be good at work or in business. Many perform only occasional actions, showcase campaigns, isolated gestures to appear generous, but without process, without consistency, without root. This does not build trust, does not transform culture, does not open doors before heaven. The wise man does not confuse kindness with spectacle. He knows he must structure compassion in clear policies, defined budget, responsible people, specific goals, and accountability. Only then does generosity cease to be an event and become a way. And that is what differentiates the righteous from the hypocrite. One plants constantly, the other only displays when convenient. Allow me to reveal 3 hidden codes of strategic generosity. First, prevention. Those who listen continually do not let small cries become great crises. Second, proportion. Generosity is not theatrical. It is giving what truly supplies, neither more nor less, without empty exaggeration, without petty calculation. And third, protection. Setting clear boundaries so as not to feed abuse, because helping does not mean enabling injustice. The God-fearing man walks with these 3 codes engraved in his heart: prevention, proportion, and protection. And when they are active, generosity becomes sustainable, solid, invincible. I want then to give you a practical tool. Imagine a decision matrix, with each type of cry on one side and the appropriate response channel on the other. If the cry is for listening, respond with the ear. If it is for encouragement, respond with the mouth. If it is for material need, respond with the hand. If it is for companionship, respond with your schedule. And if it is for opportunity, respond by opening doors. This matrix is simple but powerful because it avoids the confusion of promising what you cannot fulfill and at the same time ensures that no one around you is left without response. The wise man does not try to solve everything in any way, but uses the right resources for each need. And for this reason, his generosity becomes effective, respected, and remembered. And remember, when generosity is constant policy and not isolated act, the result is a solid organization, a firm family, an unshakable legacy. Because the favor of God and the trust of men rest upon those who keep ears open and hands extended. This is the governance of heaven, and this is the wisdom that sustains the throne of the God-fearing man. Generous home, presence that heals, bonds that prosper. Let us open now in Proverbs chapter 3, from verse 27 to 35. I wrote, "Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. Do not say to your neighbor, 'Go and come back tomorrow, and I will give it to you,' when you already have it with you. Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse anyone for no reason when they have done you no harm. Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways. For the Lord detests the perverse, but takes the upright into his confidence. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble. The wise inherit honor, but fools are disgraced." Here what I wanted to teach is that generosity within the home begins with the immediate act, not delaying good when it is in your hands to do it. The wise man does not store excuses, he stores readiness. Within the family, this means listening today to the cry of the spouse, helping today the need of a child, acting today in favor of the neighbor, because postponing good is a subtle way of closing the ear. And see, The blessing or curse of a house is not tied only to the walls, but to the attitudes of those who live within them. When there is justice, there is intimacy with God. When there is hardness, there is distance. The God-fearing man learns that domestic generosity is the key to the peace that sustains the home. I will go with you now to Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, from verses 7 to 12. I wrote, "Again I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling?" he asked, "and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." What I wanted to show here is that loneliness is not God's project. In the home, in friendship, in marriage, God gave us relationships to sustain us. The wise man understands that his prosperity is not only individual, but collective. When generosity is practiced at home, it creates bonds that withstand crises. The spouse finds rest, the children find safety, the neighbors find support. And notice how I spoke of the cord of 3 strands. This is the image of a bond sustained by the presence of God, husband, wife, and the Lord. Friends who walk in covenant with the Almighty. Siblings who share burdens before the throne of God. That cord is generosity applied in its most intimate form. Now I want to open in the Song of Songs, chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. I wrote, "Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would be utterly scorned." Here I wanted to make it clear that true love is an investment that does not fail before the most turbulent waters. The God-fearing man knows that generosity inside the home is more than providing resources. It is placing presence, time, and affection as a seal. It is offering constancy that does not fade when the floods of life come. Love that remains cannot be bought, cannot be sold, cannot be traded. It is built with generosity of listening, of time, and of sharing. When that love governs a home, no financial or emotional crisis can drown it, because the seal of generosity keeps the vine of the relationship firm. There are clear signs that a heart becomes deaf within its own home, when the husband always responds, "We'll see later," and never fulfills, when promises turn to dust, and the spouse's requests pile up in forgetfulness, when the phone receives more attention than the children's voices, when the neighbor asks for help, and you stay silent to avoid being bothered. All these are signs that the little foxes are already biting the vine of the home. The wise man discerns these signs because he knows that ignoring cries within the home is preparing the ground for bitter harvests. The God-fearing man understands that generosity is not only in the temple or in the street. It is, above all, in the secret place where the most intimate pains are shared. And to heal this deafness, simple but sacred practices are needed. Establish a weekly schedule of unhurried conversations. Make this time as non-negotiable as a business meeting. Practice routines of practical help, sharing the weight of the home, supporting the children in their small struggles, extending a hand to the neighbor in difficulty, and above all, cultivate just decisions in daily life, giving way, sharing resources, prioritizing the rest of those who are exhausted. The wise man does not see these attitudes as trivial, but as sacred liturgies, because it is in them that true generosity is revealed. Presence in the home is the clearest proof that the ear is open. There is still a very common lie, "I don't have time to help," but the truth is different. The problem is not lack of time, it is lack of priority. When the heart does not love, the clock becomes an excuse. But when the heart is generous, it finds space even in the busiest hours. The God-fearing man understands that love does not wait for time to spare, but creates time. Because helping is not a loss, it is an investment. and that investment returns in bonds that sustain life. I want then to propose a plan of reconciliation. If you recognize that you have ignored cries within your home, start with humility. Ask for forgiveness. Name what you failed to do. Say out loud, "I closed my ears to you." That gesture already begins to rebuild the bridge. Then practice the first act of repair today. Call the one you neglected. Visit the one who cried and was not heard. Prepare a small family budget destined for what I call mercy of the home, a sacred reserve to respond to the needs of the house and those who knock at the door. This discipline not only solves problems, it heals wounds. And to seal this point, I want to open now the book of Psalms, chapter 41, from verses 1 to 4. My father David wrote, "Blessed is the one who considers the poor. The Lord delivers him in the day of trouble. The Lord protects and preserves them. They are counted among the blessed in the land. He does not give them over to the desire of their foes. The Lord sustains them on their sickbed and restores them from their bed of illness." See how direct the promise is. He who opens his ear to the afflicted is guarded by God in his days of illness. He who is present in the pain of the other finds the Lord himself present in his pain. The wise man understands that generosity is spiritual insurance. While the wicked trust in fragile riches, the righteous trust in an eternal covenant. When he opens his ears to the needy, the Most High opens the heavens in his favor. This is the faithful harvest of the one who practices compassion at home and beyond. Now I want to open with you the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, from verses 4 to 9. Moses wrote, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. What the prophet of God is teaching is that the wise man's home is a small daily school, a living liturgy that happens at the table in the hallway at the gate. Generosity begins when the word occupies the heart and overflows in acts of care. The God-fearing man does not outsource the formation of his own. He speaks the truth in the morning and at night. He writes compassion on the doors with attitudes that all can read, and he ties God's instruction to his own hand so that the hand that works is also the hand that helps. When the word governs the routine, the ear remains open, and when the ear remains open, the house becomes a refuge that heals. I want then to tell you a story. There was a father who deeply loved his son. He worked long hours, provided everything he could, but without realizing it, he treated the small requests as noise. "Dad, can you watch my game?" "We'll see later." "Dad, help me with my homework?" "Not now, I'm tired." He said he loved, and he did love, but his ears were occupied. The boy grew up learning that his father's heart was far away, even when his body was near, and each, later, took away another stone from the bridge between them, until the crossing was as fragile as a thread. The years passed. The son became an adult, left home, built his own family. The father grew old, and one day felt the weight of loneliness. He called asking for company, sent messages asking for help with exams. "Son, can you come here?" And on the other side came a later, after work, after the busy week, after time to spare. In that silence, the father heard the echo of his own past, realized that the bridge he needed to cross had been dismantled by the laters he once pronounced. It was not revenge, it was the invisible law I wrote in Proverbs. He who shuts his ear to the cry will one day cry and not be heard. But the story does not end in despair. Repentant, that man sought his son, not with sermons but with confession. "I closed my ears when you were little." And from that day on, he began to rebuild the bridge, one plank at a time. He showed up at his grandson's game and stayed until the final whistle, brought soup on a day of fever, and sat in silence when there was nothing to say. Learned to ask, "How are you?" and wait for the answer. The God-fearing man does not try to buy back love. He sows presence. He practices small helps with constancy. and constancy lays the beams that time cannot tear down. The moral is simple and profound. He who silences the cry today will cry alone tomorrow. He who plants presence reaps trust. For many, the first stone of this bridge is a humble phrase, "Forgive me, I did not listen." For others, it is an immediate gesture, turning off the screen and sitting at the table. For everyone, it is the same path, generous and predictable presence, two words that save homes, heal hearts, and make the wise man a shelter where the heavens take pleasure in dwelling. Because when we open our ears to each other, we also open the doors for God to walk among us. The secret to bonds that endure time and trials is not in great isolated gestures, but in generous and predictable presence. A home that prospers is one where there is an agenda of blessings cultivated with discipline. Imagine a weekly meal without screens, only looks, conversations, and sharing. A monthly visit to someone in need, bringing not only bread, but company. And beyond the tithe and the offering, a family neighbor fund reserved to answer cries that arise. This builds invisible roots that sustain bonds even in storms. The wise man understands that predictability in loving is as powerful as intensity. Therefore, God-fearing man, if you desire bonds that endure the strongest waters, establish habits of generosity that do not depend on the mood of the day or the emotion of the moment. Make your kindness a sacred routine, a practice repeated until your home breathes compassion. When crisis comes, and it will come, your family will not be lost, because it will already be trained to support one another. Predictable generosity is the cement that unites hearts and generates lasting trust. Wise man, before we continue, I want to invite you to take one more quick pause of communion. Close your eyes again, bow your head, and pray for your home, for your business or project, for your life. Ask God for eyes to see the silent cries that are often right beside you. Perhaps it is the silence of a child, the weariness of a spouse, the loneliness of a neighbor. Pray that the Lord will give you sensitivity and make a commitment. Write in the comments at least one name, it can be just representative, for whom you will serve this week. It may be someone from your home, your church, or even your work. Share also, if you wish, and if you haven't yet, a prayer request. And do not pray only for your comment, but also take up the cry of another brother you find here. In this way, this space becomes a chain of intercession and care. Let the presence of the Holy Spirit guide you in this moment. Take a deep breath and reflect on the names that come to your mind. And remember, when we open our ears to the cry of the needy, the Lord opens the heavens to answer our own cry. The diligence of the generous and blessed man sowing. The principle that sustains this entire message is simple and profound. Whoever shuts his ear to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be heard. This is the law that governs heaven and earth. The wise man understands that each choice to listen or to ignore builds his own harvest. The God-fearing man knows that the closed ear brings silence in the day of need, but the open ear opens doors when most needed. See how the scriptures have shown us this truth in 3 dimensions. In practice, in Proverbs, we learned about the attentive ear and the hand that acts. We learned that one must not postpone doing good when it is already in our hands, that generosity must be structured, at work and at home, as a constant policy of life. In purpose, in Ecclesiastes, we understood that sowing must be constant, that accumulating wealth without ethics is vanity, and that the value of our neighbor surpasses sterile accumulation. In relationships, in Song of Songs, we saw that the little foxes of indifference can ruin the vineyard of love, but also that the seal of presence and affection keeps bonds firm even in the face of the most turbulent waters. The wise man learns that generosity is a bridge. Whoever opens his ear builds a safe passage to cross when his own time of crying comes. Whoever closes it dismantles the bridge and discovers loneliness in the hardest moment. The God-fearing man understands that generosity is not just giving resources. It is offering ear, mouth, hand, schedule, and doors. It is presence, time, justice, and constancy. And when this becomes a discipline of life, heaven responds. If every word you read here found space in your heart, live from them. Open your ears today, and God will open doors at the right time. Do not wait for the crisis to begin. Plant now seeds of compassion that will flourish in abundance on the day of need. Whether at home, at work, in business, or in the community, let your life be marked by the generosity that honors God and sustains men. And now I make you a practical invitation. Write in the comments a cry that you will answer this week. Someone you have decided to listen to, help, or support. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded to open their ears. Because when we become a community of wise men and God-fearing men, heaven finds pleasure in walking among us.